All Things Conceivable, a surrogacy podcast with Nazca Fontes.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to All Things Conceivable. As we head into Mother's Day, we love taking time to honor the parents and surrogates who make this day possible for so many families, the people who help create the gift of motherhood in all of its forms. For many, it represents one of the most meaningful gifts someone can give, helping another person experience their very first Mother's Day. As always, we dedicate this podcast to so many causes centered around family building, and we all know that the path to parenthood can look different for everyone. And today we're joined by Laura Herzer, a mother of 2 children made possible through egg donation and surrogacy. Laura will share her deeply personal journey to building her family, what she learned along the way, and how that experience led her to write her children's book, Me the Great. We also talk about how she hopes to help other women understand the calling to become a surrogate or egg donor, as well as support women who may need to turn to surrogacy to build their own families. At the heart of her story is the power of those decisions and what it means to redefine motherhood, connection, and family on your own terms. Welcome, Laura. We're so happy to have you here today for this Mother's Day special.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're going to get into a lot of topics and questions today, but before we dive in, why don't you go ahead and tell us just a little bit more about yourself, who you are, your family, and what it looks like for you today, because it's busy.
Yes, it's chaos. It's beautiful chaos, and I love every second of it. It's exactly what I signed up for. Yes, so let's see. My husband and I were both in advertising. We're on the creative side. I'm an executive creative director at BBDO Chicago. And I've lived in Chicago for 20 years, but before that, I grew up in Florida. And yeah, I now am mom to a rambunctious 5-year-old and an even more rambunctious 3-year-old. And also we have a pug named Bunker. And every day's crazy, and it's just like advertising. You never know what you're going to get, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. And like you said, it's everything you signed up for. So that's the good news, right? And,
Yes.
Laura, when you look back at the beginning of your journey towards this beautiful chaos that you're embracing in the present day, what did you imagine motherhood would truly look like? I mean, and did your vision change over time? You're embracing the chaos now, but is it what you really thought it would be?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I knew that being a parent was going to be some kind of really deep, meaningful experience and kind of life-altering and like self-altering. I think I was most surprised that I don't feel like I as a person have changed at all, but my life around me has, which is so fun and so exciting. Like I feel like I'm finally getting to experience just this whole other world that I never had I had no connection to. Like I don't really I didn't grow up with a bunch of kids or have a lot of kids in my life. So when I had my own, a lot of it, we were just, and my husband too, we were learning everything for the first time. And it's just been such an adventure. And so it's amazing.
Well, and of course, as I mentioned, and we all know here on this podcast, this pathway to your parenthood and motherhood was not easy. It was filled with obstacles and setbacks. So, without really having to kind of go into the full-blown recap of that journey, I think what listeners really want to hear, day in and day out when they tune into this podcast, and oftentimes they're at the juncture of really important decision-making in their own path to parenthood. And a lot of them want to hear from others, what was it like when it finally dawned on you, that realization that you might need to consider using an egg donor and, of course, eventually a surrogate? What emotions came up for you?
Yeah, I get this question a lot from women that are trying to make the decision for themselves. And it was definitely not easy. When our doctor first brought it up as an option, I told my husband, we've got to go to the woods and we've got to hash this out. And we hiked trails and we camped and screamed into the woods for a few days. And I just kind of tried to rationalize my way around it from every angle and try to interrogate, why is this so hard for me? And why does this feel so wrong? And when I came out of the woods, I kind of had my answers. And I think the 2 main things for me was number one of but part of it might just be like good old fashioned ego, like your id and your ego, and like, you want a mini me in the world, and I thought, well, maybe it doesn't have to be like that. Maybe, the fact that I get to pick the person that's going to like step in for me for this, that's still playing a major role. And so once I kind of I thought of it as like an ego death, and the ego is, it does not go down quietly, right? So I had to kind of like have my ego death. And then the second thought was maybe, but there's like some biological wiring, of like, within our DNA and in our genetic code, there's a lot of wiring that is telling us that, you must reproduce, you must procreate. And once I kind of put my finger on that, it's almost like the thought of like running into a burning building. Your whole body's saying, don't do this, don't do this. And you have to say, like, actually, if you're a firefighter, you have to ignore that voice in your head, and you have to go in and you got to go in and save those people. So it was a bit of that to me, of like, I need to override my genetic wiring and evolution. And because if I want to go forward, this is the only way. So once I kind of had those breakthrough thoughts, we came out of the woods, and I was ready to do it. And that was for egg donor, and that was really hard. But then once we went down that path, and it wasn't working either, and surrogacy became, was put on the table, it was much easier to make that decision because I think I'd done the really hard work getting through the egg donor decision. And so it was very funny. I asked my husband, I said, is this weird for you, do you think? Like having someone else carry our child? And he said, we've already invited one woman into our family building. What's one more? And I thought that was so great. And I was
Very
honestly,
supportive.
it was very supportive. And I thought it was a very cool, refreshing way to think about it and to frame all this. Because so much of this is like how we frame things to ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves. And his framing to like this help that we were getting, framing the help like that, it was also an inspiration for where we ended up taking the children's book ultimately.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
And that's just such a good story to hear, because you're right. It's not only, the death of the ego, bringing down the ego, who does not want to go quietly. That's one of the best expressions I've heard about this. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And, when you think about, too, it's taking the time and the thoughtfulness to move the boundary. That's how I often refer to this. You have to be ready and willing and accepting of moving that boundary of what it means and letting go, or grieving, right? You have to grieve the loss of something. And for some people who may never have to go down the path of egg donation, that have to go through the path of surrogacy, just the loss of being able to carry a child is they're grief-stricken, and they do need time. They need to go into the proverbial woods and kick and scream a little bit. So you had, the great misfortune of having the 1-2 punch, right? The double wall of first having egg donation and then surrogacy. But look what has come out of this. I mean, amazing, beautiful chaos at home, and now a children's book to talk about. But before we get into the book a little bit, you mentioned your husband in this journey, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about how he went into the woods and how he came out too.
He has had like major loss in his life. He's had major challenges. He's had like his great crisis before by losing a family member when he was quite young. And so pretty much nothing phases him. For me, this was my great battle. This was like my first real experience with, this kind of intense grief and loss. So I think through all of it, he was just so solid and such a rock. He'd already kind of been through the fire, and he was really just there to support and guide, and very much the steady eddy of our ship, because he'd weathered the storm before, and he was proof that you can come out the other side. So that's how he was. That's how he was, and that's how I still see him.
So Laura, talk to us a little bit about going through the process of selecting your egg donor.
Yeah. Well, I've never done online dating, but I think it felt a lot like that, where you're just presented with all these, amazing candidates and pictures and life stories, and it was really cool. And I think originally, you kind of have in your head of like, these are the 10 things I'm looking for. And I forget who it was that told me that, but they were like, you need to probably focus on the 2 things that are important to you. And so I had my whole list, and I was, going back and forth with Brianna of like, do you agree these are like the things we want? He really was like, this is entirely your choice. I want this to be like all you. And in retrospect, I'm glad he said that, because now when I think back again of like, what was my role in all this? It's like, well, I picked our donors, I picked our giver. So yeah, so that was really kind of, figuring out what were the true traits that we thought that were the most important, and going off of that.
Well, for the listeners, I would think that's very sage advice, because you're right. People go in with a laundry list of things that are
Yeah.
the wish list of all the wonderful things that would be great. And you realize through the challenges of selecting someone and getting on board and even getting them medically cleared and getting great
Right.
embryos, like, my goodness, it's a process.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very smart to go in with a top 2 list. Now, what about when you made it to the juncture of surrogacy and understanding that now was necessary in your family building journey? What was it like to finally meet? Let's talk about surrogate number 1.
Yeah, so that was really neat because the process was totally different. Where with the egg donor, she was anonymous. We knew everything about her except her name, and we had all the options. And then with surrogacy, you're presented with one option, and it takes a lot longer, and they're really taking into account the relationship that you're going to have. And I think initially, I'm sure a lot of intended parents feel like this. Initially, they are thinking they're going to keep things a little more transactional, a little more business-like. I don't want to get too emotionally invested in this. I've been through the ringer, and you kind of keep that emotional distance. But I have to say, when we met our first surrogate, Kristen, or she was presented to us, we immediately were like, "Oh, she's amazing. Yes, let's do this." She was so buttoned up, super warm. You could just tell like she'd be a great person to work with. And yeah, as soon as we got off the call, we said, "Yes, she's great. Let's go." And she was wonderful through the whole thing. And then the same thing for our second surrogate, Laura, and her husband Joe. We met them, and by then we were kind of like we'd been through the whole rodeo. We knew it wasn't our first rodeo. We knew how to do it, and same thing. We were like, these guys are amazing. Let's go for it, because it is like a working relationship, and you need someone who's going to be able to be really communicative and keep you updated, and someone you trust that's like doing all the right things. And both these women were they were awesome top to bottom.
And did they enhance or shape your understanding of relationships as it relates to the creation of trust, boundary setting, connection, expectations? Because it's a very delicate relationship, the intended parent surrogate dynamic. So, we all come into adulthood and we find our partners, our life partners, or our spouses, and we have connections to good friends and family members. But this is a little bit different. So I would love to know a little bit about how this further shaped that understanding for you in terms of, again, trust, boundaries, and human connection.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think both of our surrogates were very like sensitive to what we'd been through, and so I think they were like very careful about how they talked about certain things or whatnot. But I think also once we kind of got to that point, Brant and I, our state of mind was we were just like so excited that we kind of had like all the we had everything working in our favor now, and just statistically and anecdotally, we were feeling really, really positive that things were going to go our way. So I don't think we were as insensitive of a place. So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it all just went really smoothly, I think.
Was there anything that surprised you most about the emotional reality of the intended parent and surrogate relationship? Like, did anything come up where you're like, oh, huh?
Yeah, I would say how at the beginning of the process, I think we were thinking we would have a little bit more emotional reserve and be a little more transactional. And I think we were surprised at how quickly we moved past that and was just like, oh, this is great. Like, she feels like a friend. She feels like an aunt or an aunt, depending on how you say that, or what part of your country you're from, an auntie. And once the kids were born, wanting to like maintain that relationship and keep them up to date on like what the kids are doing or what funny thing they said the other day or here's a fun picture. And where I remember like at our intake, one of the questions was, what kind of relationship do you plan on having with the surrogate after the birth? And we said, I'm sure every year on the child's birthday, we'd send them like a birthday card. And I was kind of thinking that'd probably be it. But I was surprised that it's like, no, this is someone who we want to keep in our life and we want to, who's invested in the child and in their growth, which is so, they don't have a ton of aunts and uncles.
It's special.
And so it's like adding someone to the mix is that's great. You want, there's not many people who you can send a bunch of pictures of your kid and them to be as excited about them as you are. Even your best friends, they're not going to care as much. But, our surrogates are those people for sure.
And so I'm sure I'm guessing, you can tell me, it made writing the book all that more easier because some people really struggle on how to present the information to their child about their third-party reproductive origins, right? Like they really grapple with this topic. They're not quite sure how to present it or when to present it. But having these women in your children's lives from the very beginning and having these ongoing relationships probably helped not only, of course, to inform the book, but make the sharing of the story to your children all that more easier, right? I would imagine.
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, the whole reason why we wrote the book, and I should back up, I have two co-writers, Mary Dolan and Emily Ramirez, who also built their families with the help of egg donors. And we met in a support group for women who have had success through egg donorship in the Chicago area that was hosted by Resolve, the National Infertility Association. And it was just an issue that comes up again and again from all of the parents of how do you tell your kid this story? How do I talk to them about this? And like the parents are just so uncomfortable with the story themselves. And so they say that you should tell the child early and often and really normalize it. And frequently, like, finding a good children's book on the subject is a good way in to help parents with that conversation. And so as we were like looking at, all of us were trying to find books on this topic, and there was just really frankly not much out there. And the books that were out there were not great. They were they didn't really center the child's story. They were really centering the like parent struggle. So it wasn't necessarily something the kid would want to read. And a lot of them I don't think were really written in a way that a young child would understand either. And most importantly, like to us, we thought there was a real opportunity to reframe this journey to one that the children and the parents should be proud about. Because when I look back at what we went through to get our kids, I'm incredibly proud, and there was a time when I wasn't, but choosing the creative choice was hard. But now I can look back and be like, wow, that's really cool that I was able to take a step back and think about doing things differently, even though I was so stuck in my head of like, no, this is how it has to be. So absolutely, our personal journeys completely informed how we wrote the book and all the decisions that we needed to make that happen.
How do you think your children will feel when they read the book, or have they already read the book?
Yes, they have read the book. Yes, the book's released. It's out. You can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
Barnes & Noble or Book Baby Bookshop. That's our publisher on that site. You can get it there. Yeah, it was really magical having the first like hard copies of it and being able to gift it to each of them. They each got their own copy, and to sit there and read it to them was really cool. And we sprinkled the story throughout with like little Easter eggs to all of our kids. I think between the three of us, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 7 kids between the three of us now, and 2 which happened during the making of the books. It took us so long to get it out and to write it, but it was really neat to be able to see the story start to in their minds of like, oh, I understand that like multiple people came together to make me happen, and that is something really cool, and that makes me the great. And so, my daughter Ruby, she's like, Ruby the Great. Like she immediately took it on, and she wanted to bring the book to her school the next day to like daycare, and she demanded that the teachers read it to everybody. It was pretty awesome.
It's such a great book. And I would imagine that like the key age range is somewhere between 2 and 6, perhaps. I mean, it's very lively and it's illustrated so magically and colorfully and beautifully. And the language is very simple and straightforward. So I imagine that might be the sweet spot, 2 and 6.
Yeah, and we say like 0 to 6 just because even the parents even before the child really understands it, it helps the parents get used to telling the story so that as they get older and the kids start to understand. So it really has a dual purpose.
So,
Yeah.
Laura, tell me how did you sprinkle in this concept early on with your children? What language did you use? What storytelling did you deploy before the book?
Yeah. Well, this idea of, that there is some very nice women that helped us to bring Dylan and Ruby into this world. And the nice thing about one of our surrogates, she lives close enough to where we've been able to visit them on the tail end of some family vacations. So like the kids, they have someone to connect it to. It's like, Miss Laura, Mr. Joe. Yeah, well, Miss Laura carried you in her tummy. And they're like, oh, really? Huh? And then we have pictures of it too, of like with Kristen, our first surrogate, of like, yeah, and that Dylan, that was you inside of her tummy, and like, oh, huh. So it is a little easier with the surrogacy story, having an actual person to be able to point to and that they've actually interacted with to be able to explain that they helped us. And then from there, we kind of say, and there was another woman who helped as well. She gave us an egg. And they're like, oh, okay. They don't really know what that means yet, but I think in time that'll start to make more sense.
That's right. I mean, it's age appropriate. And what I always say, and what I always tried to do with my own children is believe that when they're ready for more information, they'll ask for it, right? So start simple and move it ahead. And when they're ready for more, they will be the ones to lead that conversation. And I imagine it's very similar with this topic in your home, or it was and will continue to be. And
we talk about it all the time.
I think that's great because too, right? I'm sure your experience has also been that surrogacy and egg donation are often discussed in very clinical or medical terms and naturally oftentimes shrouded in secrecy. And what do you wish more people understood about the emotional reality behind those words, surrogacy and egg donation? Not just the clinical or medical aspect, but the emotional part of it.
Yeah, well, I can't help but talk about this topic constantly because I feel like it's really important that more people understand it. And I feel like there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding in the world around it, especially in our country right now, where maybe they've never met someone that has gone through it or hasn't talked openly about it. And I've sat next to people at the airport and gotten into the whole thing, and I've seen their minds change because the way I explain it is like it's truly a gift that someone is giving you. It is the gift. I would not be able to have this family that I have, these beautiful children. If you see them, you're like, oh my God, what a gift. And I say, exactly,
Yes. I think that oftentimes, criticisms that are leveled against this process are being done so by folks who may never have met an egg donor, a surrogate, an intended parent, a child born as a result of the process. And that's usually how I approach those conversations because naturally I get into them quite a bit in the world that I move around in. And, once you kind of deliver the humanity of it and tell someone what these people are all about and their motives and their generosity and their commitment and the level of connection and trust that they bring to the process. It's usually a revelation for folks. And it's oftentimes something that they've never heard before. They just hear, what gets fed to them through media, which is by and large not quite accurate. That's sort of my point of view on it.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
When we talk about the egg donors and surrogates, let's pivot a little bit more back to them. No doubt you, even though your donor was anonymous, you've expressed tremendous gratitude for her, and you have a personal relationship with both of your surrogates. For any of the listeners who might be tuning in who think, I've considered being an egg donor. I'm not quite sure, or I want to hear a little bit more, or same thing. I'm considering being a gestational carrier / surrogate. I want to hear a little bit more. What would you share directly to them about the role they will help to play in creating a family?
Well, first of all, I think it's amazing that you're considering this. And I think for the families that would need your help, it is truly just the most beautiful, selfless gift you could give. And you think about, they say, like, the miracle of life, and I'd heard that phrase, and before I went through infertility, I didn't fully understand it. But having been through the ringer with that, I get it now. Like, it is a miracle. It is a miracle. And to be someone who can make a miracle happen, how amazing is that?
Is there anything, when you reflect on, the genesis of your story, your family building story, rewind to the very beginning, is there anything that you wish someone had sat down and told you before you began? Like, oh, hey, here are the lookouts, or this is going to be unexpected, but it's coming your way. Is there anything that you wish someone had told you?
Well, I mean, one thing that I've had to reflect on, and part of it was my time in the woods, was as open-minded as I thought I was. When it came down to having to make this choice for myself, I realized I actually was not as open-minded as I thought when it came to me. And I had to really kind of confront that. and it surprised me that I had to be more open-minded and to
In what
consider
way?
to consider a different path. It's like man plus woman equals baby. Like, that's that's almost old-fashioned, right? And if I think of myself as a modern person in this world, I need to, be thinking that if that's not working, I need to
Oh,
think
I see.
bigger than that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a phrase that kind of came to mind during that time in the woods was, when you can't change circumstances, you have to change yourself. And the fact that I was really having to really embrace that, I don't know, it surprised me a bit as well. Like, wow, like, just turning to science alone is not enough here. I've got to change myself, and I've got to change how I'm thinking about things.
I think too, maybe, and this could seem obvious to you, but often it's not obvious for folks who are in the early stages of the struggle, when the fertility treatments aren't working and they haven't quite been presented yet, perhaps with the idea of egg donation, that, there will come a time, or even, we could coin it a reckoning, where one has to realize that it's parenting, right? It's motherhood and parenting, and it's not necessarily the mechanics of how you get there. It's the outcome, it's the destination. And, sometimes, when you present it in that way, like, what's more important to you, having a child that's got a genetic and biological connection to you, or just being the mother to a child? And it's a slow process to get there. But ultimately, that's, I
Absolutely.
think, what everybody arrives at. Like, I want to be a mother to a child
Yeah.
and a father to a child.
Yeah. I mean, I think having gone through it now and having these two children of my own, it really is making me question everything I've learned about nature versus nurture, because it is wild how much like me these two kids are. I mean, it's kind of uncanny at times, the things they'll say, or their personalities, things they do. So I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if science could explain it, but yeah.
I would
Yeah.
agree. And, we see a lot in the media about, Mother's Day and what being a mother or motherhood truly means, and how there's all kinds of flavors of families today, and
Mhm.
different iterations. But I think surrogacy and egg donation is still missing quite a bit from the conversation. So I really hope that, this conversation today, weaves its way into the ether and that there's more recognition of that this is a real concrete way to build a family for many, many people. And it's only on the upward trajectory. More people than ever are, harnessing science because they have to, and they're building their family via surrogacy and egg donation. And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. So the more we can get this conversation out there and people can understand that this is really just one more facet to the way families are built in modern times, I think the better.
Yeah, and I think, egg donation in particular, I think of it as like the last bastion of infertility, where you still don't have a major celebrity who's admitted to using an egg donor to build their family. And I think that does women a disservice of, not understanding maybe what their own biological timelines are, all those things. Like when I talk to people now, they're kind of shocked that this kind of information isn't more out there. And I think, again, it's so much of it comes back to the stigma and the shame of people don't want to talk about it, and people who've actually benefited from it don't want to talk about it. And I was so excited to find a whole support group built around it, because you just can't find anybody who will admit to it. So I want to be one of the people, and my co-writers, we want to be on the other side of that. We want to be out there. We want to be talking about it. We want to be a source of information and help for people that are considering it. And, if you can't open your mind to it, it could be the difference between having the family you dreamed of and not. So we want people to know their options. Yeah,
that's right. And thank you for bringing that up too, about sort of this celebrity culture. Nobody's really, admitting to working with an egg donor. If you're 45 and having your first child.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just the surrogate that made that happen.
Right.
So, if anything, and we'll talk a little bit more about the book at the end, but, when people hear your story, it's a beautiful story. What's the one thing you most hope they walk away understanding differently?
Well, I hope that they understand that families can be made in many different kinds of ways, and the idea of family can be expansive, not limited to just the immediate people that are standing there right in front of you.
Well, I want our listeners and anybody who has children and they're thinking about how to present the concept of surrogacy or egg donation to them to run out and get Me the Great. It is a fabulous children's book. It is full of joy and excitement and color and so straightforward and easy to understand. Is there anything else you want to share, Laura, with the audience about Me the Great?
Yeah, I think we developed it really for those first early conversations. So I think it makes a great gift for someone who might have just gone through this journey. And if you're really wondering, what can I possibly, get them that would be meaningful? This could be something.
I would actually say that it might make a great gift for someone at the early stages of decision making, because one of the things that no doubt that they're grappling with is, what could I possibly tell my child about their origins? How will I possibly do that? And just having such a light, calming, joyful little board book to be able to say, oh, it could be that easy. Okay. And they could just put that wrestling to the side and move on to the next topic that they're grappling with.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I just think it's a beautiful book. I think clinicians who practice in this field should all have it at the ready. I think anybody that is in the family building realm should have it at the ready. And I'm just so glad that you and your collaborators, created this beautiful book for children and families. And I can't speak highly enough about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, that is a wrap on our Mother's Day celebration 2026. And it really is a reminder that motherhood doesn't always look just one way. And sometimes the most meaningful part is helping someone else become a mom for the very first time. If Laura's story spoke to you and you've ever been curious about what it means to be a surrogate or an egg donor, this could be a moment to explore it a little bit more. Moms like Laura are waiting for someone to say yes. These paths aren't just life-changing for the families being built. They can also be incredibly meaningful for the women who choose to step in and become an egg donor or surrogate too. So this Mother's Day, consider learning more about how you could help make someone else's dream of becoming a parent true. And to all the moms listening, happy Mother's Day to you too.
Thanks for listening. At ConceiveAbilities, we believe everyone who dreams of becoming a parent deserves that chance. And it's strong, compassionate women who make it possible. With 30 years of experience building families, ConceiveAbilities has seen firsthand the incredible impact surrogates make. Women, like our surrogates, are a powerful force for change, uplifting families, strengthening communities, and proving that when women empower women, anything is possible. Becoming a surrogate is more than a journey. It's a chance to make a lasting impact. Learn more about surrogacy at ConceiveAbilities.com, because when the match is right, dreams come true.